discussed already. I missed a few sessions. When a parent has brought up their children in the way of the Lord, and after they are old, they decided to leave the way of God and go astray, is that parent still going to be judged for the way the child turns out? I don't know whether that was a question.
That was the question, yes. So every single individual on this earth has a personal responsibility before God. It is personal because one day the Bible says we will stand before the judgment seat of Christ. In our responsibilities as parents, definitely we have a role to play. Let me paint two scenarios. The first is when the parents have done their best to love the children, to raise them in the knowledge and the fear of the Lord. They have done their part. Just like David, King David raised his children. I'm sure he wasn't a perfect parent, but I'm sure that he must have done his part to some degree. A son like Solomon started well in the knowledge and the fear of God. God appeared to him twice, promised him, and did what you would have thought was the right thing in the beginning. Along the way, because of the great blessings that God endowed, bestowed upon Solomon, God had warned him, be careful about those three sins that we all know. Warned him about power, about wealth, about women, those three W's, three F's, three G's. He warned him all that, but still, in the end, Solomon, left God. He died in unbelief. He was worshiping other gods. So the parent in that particular case, I think, did his part, and the son chose not to. Why? Because every single individual has a will and makes choices, as we were looking at choices yesterday. Choices are very, very important. We make choices every single day, and these choices are our responsibility. That's what makes us free moral agents. We are free moral agents created in the image of God, which image includes freedom to choose. And God holds us responsible for that choice. Anybody who plays around with that choice is dealing with the image of God. Anybody who fights the free choice is fighting the very image of God in your life. So sons and daughters have a right and have a choice or choices to make in their own life, and they'll be responsible for that. The parent who has not done any, who had not done their responsibilities, certainly will not only suffer loss because they don't have inheritance in their children, but they will also answer. Those are two different things. One, if you raise children well, both spiritual and biological, they become your crown. Everything they achieve in life, if they are successful in life, if they accomplish kingdom exploits, what they accomplish will also be credited on your account. What your children accomplish, both biological and spiritual, will also be credited on your account. So you'll have a big account, not only because of what you did, but also because of what your disciples and your children accomplished on earth long after you had left. So your children, in a way, both biological and spiritual, become part of your inheritance or crown. So if you don't raise them up in the knowledge and the fear of the Lord, if you don't disciple them, it means you are going to suffer loss in two ways. One, you'll miss that, but also number two, you'll have to answer for unfaithful stewardship. You have not been, or you stand before the Lord and says you were not a faithful steward. You are not a faithful steward of what you were given. God gave you children to raise. Psalms 127 tells us the children are a gift to us. They are given to us as to steward. So you stand before the Lord, and then you answer for that that unfaithful stewardship. But also, number three, while here on earth, when Eli failed to raise his children, now I've finished the eternal part. The eternal part is in heaven when we have left here. But here on earth, if you raise your children well, you get a reward even the natural reward. Even a non-believer would get this kind of reward, the law of sowing and reaping. So when children are good, they give you a good name, they become successful in life, they become a good insurance for your old age. That is obvious. When children are raised well, disciplined, wherever they go, they will be disciplined employees, disciplined CEOs, because you raise them up well. So you get that here on earth as automatically as a law of sowing and reaping, because what you sow, you reap. If you sow discipline in your children, they will be disciplined. If they have been raised well, they will live a good life, and wherever they are, employed or otherwise, they will. People will love them, will like them, and they will make a good and successful life. That is on the good side of reaping. You reap well through your children. You reap blessings. You reap praises. So wherever they are, the name, the family name will be continued. You yourself, you reap the harvest of their hard work, of their good name, of their faithfulness. That faithfulness you've done in their lives. That faithful stewardship will show in their life, and it will also benefit you. The negative is also true, that when you don't do your part, then you also suffer. You suffer in that whatever happens to them, suppose they become thieves, robbers, you receive phone calls, there are so many things, that will come out of that, because your children are unruly. Just the mere fact that they carry your name, but they carry your name in a bad way, because every time they are misbehaving, your name will be involved. Or you see mutabani wa gundi, or you see mutabani wa gundi. So every time your children misbehave, there is something that you suffer just by mere fact that they carry your name. So that is here. It is here on earth, not even in eternity, but here on earth, you start to reap. Then number two, the effect of those activities, apart from the bad name, the bad press that you suffer, you will also, you yourself cannot have peace. If anytime you're going to tell your son is there, we found him, they're beating him, he's now in prison, you have to go and bail him out. You have to stand short. There's so many, ways in which your children, if they're not raised well, they, even here on earth, before we get to heaven, or the level of headache that you suffer just by your name being dragged into it, or having to go and stand surety if they commit crimes, or if you have to go bail them out, or you have to pay for the debts that they have incurred. There are so many things that, so the raising good children, certainly all of us would want to raise children, and it is worth the investment that we put in, and that is worth it. There are 6 inheritances that we give to our children. I've shared this before, but just because there are other people who have not been with us, maybe let me talk about it quickly, and then you will, you may understand the full implications of what we have been sharing. But now, in light of those of our children, let me re-share that sharing that I shared here before. I taught about the 6 different inheritance that we leave with our children. There are 6, and I'm going to show here. Let me show it in a slide. These are the 6 inheritances that you leave for your children. The first one is physical. Physical meaning that they carry your image, the physical image. Human beings are in both worlds, the spiritual world and the natural world. You are a child of God, you carry his image, but God is not physical, he's spiritual, so you carry his spiritual image. Romans 8:29 says that those whom he foreknew, he predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. So God is a spirit, so we carry his image within. When that image is fully grown, it shows outside. That is the likeness. The image is within, the likeness is out. When Christians lived a good life in Antioch, they were called Christ-like ones. Christ-like ones. Christ-like ones is where we get the word Christians, because Jesus, the Christ-like, they are the Christians. So that is the likeness which emanates from the image within. Now, we, as parents, should bring out the 2. One is the spiritual, and the other is the physical. Because for us, we also have the physical. We also give our children that image. They resemble you. Your nose, your eyes, your height, the physical features. These are by birth. That is the first inheritance you give to your children. The second is mental. And the mental and psychological, what we call the personality. And we see that when Paul is speaking and writing to Timothy, and he says, there's traits that I saw in your grandmother. I also saw them in your mother. Now I see them in you. So there are personality traits in the life of Timothy. I've put the scriptures there so that in case you are sufficiently interested, you can read them out. So when Paul went to Lystra, where Timothy was, he got very good commendations. And in that church, the grandmother and the mother were meeting, were congregants in that city of Lystra and Iconium, where they all knew Timothy. Grew up in the church, a very good young man, raised in the two congregations and was serving faithfully. When Paul came and asked who should take, everybody commended Timothy because he got a good training in that city, in Lystra. That is, the training is in number 3, but the personality traits, he got them from his parents. Now we have these traits, what we call temperaments. Temperament is part of your soul that is passed on from your parents. Parents can pass on their souls to their children. If the personality traits are different, we know what we call the choleric, the melancholy, the sanguines, the phlegmatic. Those are personalities which are passed on from parents to children. So when your parents pass on their souls to you, you are inheriting something from them. But whatever they go through during life, suppose a mother goes through a very difficult time during pregnancy, and in that time she's depressed, she goes through this and that. Much of that goes into the baby, even though the baby is still within. Now, a lot of those things happen and affect children emotionally. We dealt with that at length during the deliverance weeks. We're talking about those effects in our mother's wombs. Those are some of the effects: emotional, stress, depression, rejection, and so on. Those are passed on to the children, to the babies. You also, when babies are inside, they're affected. A good example is Mary meeting Elizabeth. When they met, the children inside also met. John and Jesus also met inside. And the Bible tells us, yes, John the Baptist was filled with the Holy Spirit from within. And he was going to be the forerunner of Jesus Christ. And so you can see the impact that John inside. Elizabeth rejoiced on seeing Jesus, or meeting Mary, hearing the voice of Mary. The boy John the Baptist inside heard and rejoiced. Suppose it was a bad experience, it would have affected John the Baptist. Now that it was good, it affected him positively. So we have those effects in our souls, and we pass them on to our children. The third is the education, the training that we give children. The training is very broad. The training in the home, which includes many things that we sometimes overlook. But you see, when children are growing up, what they see their parents doing, the way they do things, how they treat guests, how they treat visitors, how they treat their enemies, how they treat their friends. You have no idea how much this rubs on the children. They may never really even consciously think about it that way, but what they see you doing rubs on them in the way they think. That is the way you treat enemies, because that's how they saw their parents doing it. That's how you treat needy people. There's so much training that takes place, what children see by virtue of growing with their parents. They call that training. In the school, you have teaching there, but in the teaching, much of what you are given, sometimes you have a choice to accept or reject. But when you are at home, the parents have a way in which they train you. For us who grew up in villages, we knew how there are so many things that we now appreciate when we grew up. For example, we used to sit down while eating. Let me show you a bit of it, okay? Amateeka g'oku lujjuliro. I don't know how many of you can remember that. Tosimba lukono, that is training. You are all sitting down, you are eating in your plates. You don't tolia ngoswankula. That was to help you to learn not to speak. To eat, and then the food is splashing around others. Tosooka kulyamu nnyama, meaning you eat meat at the end. Toyogerera ku mmere, rest the food, don't speak while you're eating. So there were a few of those, and many others become part of your life. It was meant to, we didn't have tables like the dining tables that some of you had a chance to have. For us, we didn't have them. We were sitting down on the floor, and that is how it used to be, or rujuliro, but it had laws or rules that you are not supposed to do. Linda bakubegere, and so on and so forth. So some of you did not go through that. Some of us did, especially those of us who grew in the villages. Okay, so that is the training in the house, in the home. Then there is the training that the rest of the village, you are all involved in raising the children. One time we were walking around, one of our neighbors had planted cotton. So as we were playing with the pods of the cotton. So the owner came and he saw us. I remember he slapped me. And when he slapped me, we ran away. And I was very scared because I knew he was going to go home and then report us that we have been playing with cotton pods. Fortunately, it didn't come. But in our village, every parent, everybody in the village was a parent. You could discipline the children. And if he came and reported at home, we would still have been repunished. So the whole village and community or society was involved in raising the children. So all of us knew it. We grew up knowing it. So if a visitor comes in the house and you've been playing, you were so scared that it's going to report what you did. So that is part of the training in the home, training in the community. And now from there, you go to school. The school trains you what you do, how you do it, and that kind of thing. So what you learn at home plus the community, then you're now adding the schools where you go, primary, secondary, tertiary institutions, university, and so on. So those are the trainings that you get. Now, suppose you go through a bad, experience, like this small boy here you see. This is like child abuse. This boy has to endure. His father is huge, and yet he has to survive. So he has to hold on to this man riding. These are experiences that we go through as we are looking at wounds, the wounds that we suffer while in life. They shape you. You get them from your parents. Now at school, this particular girl is in a abusive. Now look at this girl. She's
asesemye bamukubye olw'okusesema bamusiimuza wasesemye.
This was a teacher
omwana gw'oli bakulu omwana ali bulungi ku ssomero
beating and mistreating the girl. She's young. So you can see some of these are the wounds that we are talking about. So at school, you had experiences that affected you and shaped you. So what you are today is the inheritance which you have either by birth, by training, or by these experiences. These experiences here, they really shape you. When you come in life, you are either shy or confident or closed in. There are so many things that happened in our life. So you wonder why somebody can never raise their hand up when they are asked a question, even when they know. So you wonder, you see another girl who is very young, but very confident. Now look at this girl. Now, if you are to compare that child who has grown, you can imagine the environment that child grew up in, love, that applause when people are all cheering. This girl will grow up being a very confident young girl and later on mature lady. She will become a very successful person because of that kind of environment that she grew up in. When you compare that with this one, being beaten, being abused, so the two may definitely have a totally different background when they come to life. When you look at this girl, the father is always embracing and laughing, and so those kind of people grow up in life and become very successful, become very, very confident. So the community where you grew up, the training that you get. Now, if you are in a conditions of fear, you have grown like the children who grew up during Joseph Kony's war in the northern Uganda. Children lived in camps, internally displaced people's camps. I used to go there and I saw the way children lived in fear all the time, waiting for an attack, because Joseph Kony would attack and burn whole villages and ravage and take children, girls as sex slaves. And when they would attack a village, they would take the boys and girls and force them to kill their parents. So you stab your parents to death before you are conscripted in Joseph Kony's army. I'm sure some of you are not even aware of that, but that's what they used to do. The soldiers force you to kill your relatives, your parents, your siblings, the older ones. So they were taking children because they are easily manipulated. They are more, impressionable. So they had to do that so that they kill any sympathy in your heart. Later on, you'll be able to do anything. That's what you did. So you grew up in that village where everybody, look at this old woman. She has to have her weapon. She doesn't have a gun, but they live on standby. She's seated there, but they are waiting anytime. If there is an attack, this old woman is ready to fight. Now, a child who has grown in that kind of environment is shaped by that environment and will the children grow up seeing that, and that's what they become in life. They're going to be very aggressive. They're going to be meaning that all the time they are thinking about danger and so on. So there are I have many examples that I would give. In our time now, most of the young people don't have this level of discipline. They don't have that. They never have time with the parents. Most of their time is dancing, is WhatsApp. They spend most of their time, the parents are not there, they're at work. The children, of course, they have no restraints. They spend most of their time either playing or what. The generation, this generation now is
watch till the end.
They are always about life is all about dancing, enjoying life everywhere in the schools, and that's what they know as life. So you can see the difference between the ones who have grown in the setting where you wake up, you brush your teeth, you sweep the house, you clean the sitting room, then you go to, so you grow up with that kind of discipline. While the generation that we're talking about in our day, Generation Z, they don't have that. For them, life is all about celebration, dancing, enjoying life, and that kind of thing. That there is a totally different, the trajectory is different in both cases. So, but as a parent, you are responsible for the part you played in your children's life. If you think it's all giving them good life and just buying them gifts and what without discipline, you are going to suffer loss in the end. Eli suffered loss on earth, but also in heaven. On earth, those children caused the whole nation to suffer. Eli, the priest in Shiloh, his children were wicked. They were not disciplined. People would bring sacrifices and they would eat the meat. The Bible says they treated God's offerings with contempt. In those days, they used to bring live things, goats and sheep, and they would be slaughtered and offered to God. So these children were just doing anything they wanted. They would sleep with the women in the holy place. And then God warned Eli and said, I'm going to bring judgment on your house. Eli never said anything to his children. And they continued like that until judgment came on the whole nation. So can you imagine, judgment came on the whole nation because of these children of Eli. And then not only that, here on earth, he said, your house is not going to continue to be a priest. So the priesthood was removed from that lineage and was given to another one. Later on, you'll find that change when Abishai and the Zadok from another lineage took over during the time of David and Solomon. But it was because of the children who have been not raised well by their father. So there is a part which is later on in heaven, but there is also a part here, which is here on earth, the sowing and reaping, which is on earth. Okay, so I'm sure you have you understand that part which I'm emphasizing. Let me go back to those inheritances. The other inheritances we've been talking about. So we've looked at the education here, the physical futures, the mental, the soul, but then the education. Especially I've emphasized the parental part, and later on your investment in them to study, to read, to become successful in life. You invest in their education. One of the key issues about Jews is that they believe in education so much, they sacrifice to ensure that their children are educated. Israelites or Jews believe in education, invest in education, value education. Unlike, for example, the Arabs don't equally value education. In the settings, the biblical times, primary school was in the home, the secondary school was in the synagogue, the university was the temple was the university. So what Jesus did not learn from Joseph and Mary in the home, he went to the synagogue and asked those questions. The synagogue leader answered them. Those which he didn't were referred to the temple where the scholars and scribes were. So when he was 12, he already had a whole list which Mary had failed to answer, and Joseph and then the synagogue leader in Nazareth could not or had failed to answer. Now he took them to the scholars in the temple in Jerusalem. That's how the whole nation was structured. Education was in the system. The parents were, as Jesus was growing up, his education was both moral and practical, soft skills, vocational skills, leadership, everything was apprenticed in Joseph's carpentry workshop. So he was learning holistically the 3 H's, the heart, the head, the hands, the house. Those 4 H's were part of the system of education in Israel. He would learn the Bible, and the only textbook they had was the Bible, the scriptures. So that was the mental part. It also included the vocational skills, which is relationship number 3. It also included the heart, which is the relationship with God. It also included learning to live in a community. You always think about yourself in the context of the community. So the Jews or the Hebrews have a holistic approach to life. It's part and parcel of their nature. They live, what do they call in the modern terms, kibbutz, where they live in communities and they are taught to respect and to honor others. They are to consider others' needs and that kind of training. So that is inheritance number 3. Then number 4 is what you leave after you've worked, accumulated wealth, money, property, then you bequeath that to your children. David left a whole estate to his son Solomon when he became king. That is a big one. This one, everybody knows that once you do, you work and you accomplish a lot in life, and you bought houses, land, property, have a big estate, you leave that to your children. Now, many of the young generation of our day, they emphasize so much this number 4. First of all, let me start with parents. It is part and parcel of our responsibility to leave an inheritance to our children. In fact, the Bible says a righteous man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, meaning what he leaves will support the children and then the grandchildren. So that's why the Bible says he leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So it goes beyond even the children and gets part of godliness. The culture of, for example, when national leaders tend to borrow and overborrow from the future, consuming it today, that's not godliness. And many of our nations are now full of debt. America is the biggest debtor. Now I don't know whether they are $27 trillion in debt or more. unfunded liabilities, what if we combine, there's no way America can pay her debt. But not only America, almost every nation is there. A few nations in Europe, I think, are not in debt, like Switzerland or a few others, Norway or so on. But majority of the nations live in debt, meaning they borrow from the future. They're taking wealth from their children and consuming it in the present. Or the parents have overspent, and so by the time they die, the children start to pay debts which were incurred by the parents. That's ungodliness. That's not godliness. Or the parents are not even bothered. Let the children work for themselves. That is a wrong attitude. So this number 4 is a godly part. Now that I've finished the parents, let me go to the children. Although it is important that parents do plan for the children and leave an inheritance, it's wrong for children to think that they're going to depend on what the parents did. You know that when children are not well raised and they start to suffer in life, now they start to think that it's the parents who are responsible to make their life good, to ensure that they live a good life. And especially they become entitled. That entitlement of thinking that you have to care for this, you have to take care of this, you have to do this, you have to, that it puts pressure on the parents. It's a wrong attitude. In Mark chapter 7, it shows us the Jews were taught that it is the children who have to take care of their parents when they are old. And Paul talks about that too, about widows, that when children grow, they are supposed to take responsibility for their parents, the welfare, take care of them when they're old, feed them, look after them. It is the other way around. It is in today modern world, young people are so enamored with the land, estate of their parents. They spend most of their time meditating on this, so they cannot become successful when they have that kind of attitude. It's a very unfortunate situation where children do that. Although it is incumbent on parents to take care of their children when they are young and then leave a good inheritance, but in case they were not, because children, what normally children don't realize that the parents were not as privileged as they are. In our generation, our parents didn't have a good education. They didn't have the opportunities that we have. So they may not have been able to even leave anything for you. Just in case they didn't, then it becomes incumbent on you. That's why commandment number 5 is the first commandment on the second tablet. Take care of your father and mother. Honor. Honoring your parents is part and parcel of, taking care of them is part of honoring them. How do I honor my parents? By taking care of them. And when you do, it means that you get a blessing. The first blessing is on the first tablet, which had 4 commandments. The commandments to do with God, our relationship with God, which is relationship number 1. All of us, I'm sure, are aware that the greatest blessing comes from relationship number 1. But among the second, the second most important blessing comes from our parents. Our parents on earth are a very important source of our blessing. We have to love our parents, honor them, even when they are bad, even when they are not good, you honor them. Even if they're night dancers, to other people in the village, they're night dancers, to you, their parents. Many people or young people don't know that commandment. There are 4 commandments on the first tablet, there are 6 commandments on the second tablet. The topmost on the second tablet is number 5, commandment number 5. You shall honor your parents so that it may go well with you in life. so that you may live long and then prosper. Now, if you don't do that, you are going to suffer. It is, whether you like it or not, you can postpone it, but it will be as sure as the rising of the sun. It's important to honor parents. Even when they make mistakes, you still are supposed to honor them. You can talk to them, you can complain, but in a way that is not abusive. And that is a big, big issue nowadays. It is a very, very big issue when young people don't respect older people, especially parents. This is true in churches, in communities. There's so many ways in which young people, they just disregard, and the community cannot have a blessing when they are doing that. So that is the inheritance part. That is then number 4. Then number 5, the spiritual inheritance. I've mentioned the law of sowing and reaping. This law of sowing and reaping, God talks about it first in Genesis chapter 8, that as long as the earth continues, seed time and harvest will not cease. So when you sow, whatever good things that you're sowing, prayer, serving God, all those good things that you are doing, your children are going to reap them. If you are doing bad, they are also going to reap them. So you are leaving an inheritance for your children in those 2 aspects. If you are constantly serving, the testimony I gave about Phoebe, for example, Phoebe prayed for me. I wasn't yet married. She prayed for me, for my wife, my children, and my children's children. And so part of my blessing today is Phoebe. I have some other testimonies. I'll give them some other time, similar to that of Phoebe and others. You know, when I share them, when you have another time, I'll continue sharing some of them. And you know, you do good to somebody's child, other people will do good to your children. You may not live to see them alive, but one time my mother was telling me, you know, and telling us she was discussing something. I don't remember what it was, but she said, your father used to be very tough on particularly your elder sisters. That and they used to kind of be very tough and demanding and what. So one time she asked him, our father, said, why are you so hard on this, you know, your daughter? And he said, you know, she's the eldest of all these girls and boys, and I don't know whether I will live to raise my children. But in case I don't, she'll be the one taking care of the others. So I have to make sure for her, I invest a lot in her. And that taught me a great deal. And he said, for me, I don't know whether I've raised my children up to old age. I don't know whether I live long enough, but I have to invest in her. So you can see our father ended up dying early. And so the investment he made in his daughter actually worked. And the daughter, she put her time, he put his time in to discipline, to make sure he's upright. You know, that is a sowing. That is a sowing. Then he reaps, because when you sow discipline, courteousness, all those good traits, later on in life, they will overflow into other people's life, into whatever they're doing. That is one way of sowing and reaping. So for us parents, the good things and the bad things that we do will show up in the children. And today I don't have time to this, but during the time of deliverance, I've covered a lot of that, of how parents or our children are suffering because of the sowing, the bad sowing that the parents did, especially the bad sowing. The good sowing is that when David has done wonderfully, and God says, because of what you've done, your children will always rule. That is the law of sowing and reaping. You'll always have somebody sitting on your throne. At the moment, Jesus is sitting on the throne of David as King of Kings and Lord of Lords because of what David did. So you can imagine how God incorporates a human being into his eternal plans, and Jesus himself sitting on the throne of David. Amazing. That is the law of sowing and reaping. And then finally, your prayers. You sow into your children by the prayers you pray daily, mentioning your children. Hannah did that to Samuel. Samuel was living among very, very the best young men who were very substance abuse, sexual abuse, they were doing all sorts of things, but Samuel was never affected. He did not go their way. He was not influenced because of the prayers. It wasn't Eli who stopped him. He was living among these wicked young men, but he was not affected because of the prayers. So you can see another very important investment that you leave for your children is intercession and prayer. Job used to do that, praying for his children constantly, discipling them and all that. So you see those 6 inheritances, brethren, is what I want you to be aware of. So the question our brother or sister asked about our responsibility, I have kind of explained it so that you may see the full implication. And normally I use these 2 examples. Jonathan Edwards and Sarah Edwards, who lived in the first Great Awakening in 1730s in the US, is very known as a revivalist. He used to spend a lot of time with his children. He had 11 children, and he would come back every evening and teach them and explain scriptures. He did a wonderful work in his home, and his wife, of course, was always remained at home. And somebody did a study and on 1,400 descendants of Jonathan Edwards, and look at what came out. A vice president, 13 college presidents, 65 professors, 100 lawyers, 30 judges, 66 physicians, 3 senators, 3 governors, 80 orders of government offices. This is what you're reaping. You did something small in the house daily or every evening or through your prayers. Look at how you spread. You fulfill the scripture which says you will be saved and your household. I will bless you. You will be a blessing. Nations will be blessed because of you. That's exactly what you do. You fulfill. When God looks at you, you are like a tree which has really blossomed and become a great blessing. So when Jonathan and Sarah stand before the Lord looks at all these 13 college presidents, the 65, whatever they accomplish, look at the impact on the nation, on education, on other institutions, on law and justice, in the judiciary, in science and technology, in the Congress, in governance. Literally, you are impacting all spheres of the nation and beyond, because what America does, for example, not only America and the others, you end up into many other nations. So that's what he says, that I will bless you and you'll be a blessing. So these children become a blessing to many people. And you and the nations will be blessed because of you. That's what God wants you and me to be. Another man lived during the same time. They were contemporaries of Jonathan Edwards. This man was called Mark Jukes. He was a drunkard, abused the substance, drug addict, and lived exactly at the same time. So a sociologist, Richard Dugdale, made a study on 1,200 descendants of Mark Jukes. The way he started to make research was that there were 42 different men in prison in New York who traced their pedigree from Mark Jukes. So he said, hey, you're also coming from Mark Jukes. So 42 of them. So he started to now go back and find out who is this Mark Jukes. So he went and traced 1,200 of the descendants of Mark Jukes in 1877. Look what he found. 7 were murderers, 60 were thieves, 190 were prostitutes, 150 were other convicts, 310 were paupers, 440 addicted to alcohol, 300 died prematurely, and so on. So Jukes' descendants alone, the ones who had been traced, when they calculated the cost, they had cost the state of New York $1.25 million just to so just to arrest them, incarcerate them. The cost alone on those descendants of Mark Jukes was $1.25 million. So you imagine what wickedness does. You don't bring a blessing, you bring a curse to a nation. There's no discussions on the house of the wicked. Proverbs 3:33. The house of the wicked will be destroyed. Look at the destruction. 300 died prematurely, 440 addicted to alcohol, 310 paupers, and so on. So this is the difference every time we invest in the children. It's important to see this. It's important to understand the impact that it goes beyond you. So this all this is on earth now. Mark Jukes sowing and reaping, this is all on earth before we even get to heaven. This one is Jonathan Edwards on earth, the law of sowing and reaping before we get to heaven. So you see that on earth there is a reaping. Even before you get to heaven, there is a reaping here that will reap when we sow good seeds. I hope I've elaborated enough on that point. When we cover a topic, we always want to bring it in a full perspective. So I want to give back to Bishop Kabuye, just in case there are questions, more questions on that particular area, and then we can discuss or have some comments.
Thank you so much, dear Bishop. Saints, anyone with a question, comment, observation, or testimony, please put up your hand or unmute your microphone. We have little time. Let's use it. Let's use that time, please. Hello? An observation or testimony or question, please. You can chat or put up your hand.
Especially the person who asked the question. I don't remember who it was. Who was the person?
It was I think she's called Biola, but she's not on the altar today.
Sorry.
I promised yesterday that I would answer the question today. So sorry that she didn't. Okay.
But we have learned a lot. We thank God for her question to help us reshape our mind. Anyone, please? Maybe a question could be related to this. It could be related on the relationships we've been going through. Yes, we still have some time, please. Don't hesitate.
Let me just share something, but just to add to what or confirm what Bishop has been sharing. Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. It's very true that what we live by what happens at home affects our children, and even if it is done silently. In my work, in my profession as a teacher, I've seen this happen so much, because you have children who come from different backgrounds. So if you take time to follow up a child and see why they are behaving sometimes in a way that is not very common, if you take time to follow up, you find that where they are coming from has quite a very big effect. For example, if you have two children, one coming from the slum, who has grown up in the slum, you see the kind of behavior that they show. You really wonder, it's far different compared to the children of their age who come from other places. Sometimes you find this child is not paying attention, is sleeping very early in the morning, and yet they would be awake. And sometimes they keep distracting others. Then when you take time to find out, for example, a child who comes from the slum, a lot of activities go on in that place. It doesn't matter whether it's day or at night. So the child has not had adequate rest. The child has all these things bombarding them. They hear lots of things. Their language alone has a lot to desire. And the way they live their life, you see that they are tormented by so many things. And sometimes they are living a life that they are living beyond their age. They do things that you don't expect of a child just because of the environment that they have grown in. On the other hand, a child like Bishop has been teaching, you find a child they are in the same class, they are in the same age range, but then you see this child, whenever you ask a question, they really put up their hand and they ask questions when they have not understood, but the other child will never ask. They are quiet. You only have to spot, and you look at their faces, and their faces is telling something, and then you prompt them, you ask them. So I just wanted to confirm that yes, it happens a lot, and for us who interact with them in the class, we see a lot. Now, if a teacher is not supportive, or if a teacher is not bothered, does not care, especially now when we look at our primary schools these days, but also some secondary schools where we have very huge numbers, especially in the public schools, you find that a teacher may not pay attention to the needs of different children. We'll move with those who are perhaps who can learn at his speed or at her speed. Yet, if they were in a smaller class, you'd easily spot the needs, what is affecting these children, and perhaps try to help. But again, they stay with you for a shorter time. For example, now in our universities, we get so many children, so many young people. If they have come from schools that cheat, we really have issues having to help that young person, and yet they stay with us just for 3 years, and then they are moving out into the world. You really see a difference between a child who has come from a school that do things on their own, that are trained to read on their own, that are trained to be independent, to a child who has who has come from a school where they cheat, where they don't mind. I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Bishop, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sandra, for that. You see, what she has mentioned is a very big problem today, where children come from schools which are cheating, and they come with very, very powerful, triple A, ABB, and all those kind of things. And then when they get to university, you find they are not. Now, you teach children to steal. It becomes part of life. Now, if that becomes your husband or wife, so you can see what that means. The training, when you have those kind of people in your life, in your marriage, in your workplace, these are the people we are releasing now in the marketplace. And because the home, like what I showed you earlier, they never had that kind of grooming in the home, where we were taught manners, how you treat guests, how you must be courteous. They missed all that. They got marks, but when they come out in life, they cannot relate. They don't know how to treat people. They don't know how to respect others. So this is the kind of challenge that we now have in our days. And you find families are not really going to prosper. I was doing a similar research in the western part, and they told me about a man called Reverend Buningwire, and then they showed me the family tree. It's just like this tree here of Jonathan Edwards. All these people are still living. They showed me how many lawyers, how many prominent people. This was a very godly man who lived way back in the Western Uganda. He loved his children. He raised them. So this is not something that is only for Americans. For us here, I'm trying to get similar examples. In our problem is that we don't have many records. Here we have just started to know records, but when I read that and they showed me the family tree of Boningwire, I was so happy to see that God is faithful. Even when you die, your works continue with you. So, brethren, learn to understand that these 6 inheritances, you're going to leave them. You are leaving them for your parent, for your children. The first 3 you may have already completed. You still have to leave estates. You still are sowing, and they are going to reap. You still have to intercede. If you can continue with any of this, it will be very, very good. God bless you. We meet again on Monday.